At the crack of dawn, a gleaming black limousine wound its way along the winding mountain road cutting through the majestic Alps. The window rolled down, and Charlotte Whitmore, Geneva's 22-year-old heiress, furrowed her brow as she gazed at the mist-shrouded peaks. The mountain chill seeped through her cashmere coat, sending a shiver across her skin. Ahead lay the tiny village of Edelberg, its red-tiled roofs peeking from beneath a stand of dark green pines. Her father, billionaire Edward Whitmore, sat behind her, watching his daughter's reflection in the rearview mirror. He knew Charlotte resented being exiled to this remote, tranquil place, but he had spent months planning it, to teach her self-reliance, patience, and humility before she inherited the vast Whitmore fortune. The limousine pulled up in front of a weathered wooden cottage numbered 17. The creaking gate brushed softly against two stone pillars. Word had spread through Edelberg that the city heiress had arrived, and villagers gathered along the path, women in aprons carrying baskets of vegetables, young men clambering over stone walls in curiosity, and children trailing behind, wide-eyed with excitement and apprehension. Charlotte shrugged, forcing herself to look proud as she stepped out without even glancing at her luxury suitcase. She shrugged off her coat and inhaled deeply to banish the stifling sensation. Across from her, a tall man with dark brown hair whipped by the morning breeze approached with measured steps. "You are," his voice was warm but cautious, "Charlotte Whitmore." She narrowed her eyes at his strong European features, calm, sorrowful, unreadable. In that instant, she felt an odd pull. "That's right," she replied coolly, tone sharp. "And you are?" "Mason Blackwood," he said, offering his hand. "I will be your guide, and cover all your living expenses while you're in Edelberg." Charlotte frowned. "A guide? I'm not here for a nature tour." Mason smiled faintly, not answering. In the soft morning light, he leaned on his wooden staff, exuding the quiet authority of someone deeply respected by the villagers. Awkwardly placing her suitcase on the gravel, Charlotte folded her arms. "I don't need a servant. I can manage on my own." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Here, you certainly can. But if you want to excel in this training, I suggest you start with the smallest tasks." Silence fell until Edward Whitmore climbed out of the limousine and nodded to Mason. "Thank you for receiving her. Charlotte, I've given him full authority over your daily schedule." Charlotte shot her father a glare, then turned on her heel and strode into the cottage yard, suitcase in tow. Each step felt heavy, as if she were sliding from her throne. Mason hurried to keep pace, maintaining a respectful distance. "House number 17, he said, pointing to the small home with its deep red tile roof. "Here you will live, cook, clean, grow vegetables, and harvest fruit. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., meet in front of the stables." Charlotte snorted. "Stables? I've never ridden a horse." He nodded. "I will teach you. To the villagers, horses are friends. Learning to ride is learning to respect life." Edward smiled approvingly and patted her shoulder. "You'll learn the value of labor, Charlotte. You won't regret it." As the limousine rolled away, leaving only a thin cloud of dust and Charlotte's bewildered gaze, Mason invited her into the house. Inside, the furnishings were simple yet cozy: a large wooden table, a few old bookshelves, the cold embers of last night's fire. Landscape paintings and black-and-white photos of villagers harvesting their crops adorned the walls. In the corner of the kitchen sat a pot of wildflower tea still steaming lightly. "This is the living room and kitchen," Mason explained. "Your bedroom is on the left, with a window overlooking the valley. The small bathroom is at the back." Charlotte surveyed the oak cupboard, the plain painted dishes, and the sturdy 1.5-meter bed piled with thick blankets. In that moment she felt her heart sink. No luxury here, yet somehow, it felt genuinely inviting. "I'll carry your linens upstairs," Mason said, hefting a large canvas sack. Charlotte followed in silence, determined not to betray how unmoored she felt. She opened the bedroom door. Dawn light filtered through the wooden window frame. Beyond lay mist-clad mountains. The hush was complete except for wind in the pines and a bamboo wind chime creaking in the hallway. "Would you like to rest before your first task?" Mason asked. Charlotte paused, then shook her head. "I want to see the vegetable garden and the stables." At last, Mason smiled. "Very good. Tomorrow at 7 in front of the stables." As the sun climbed higher and Mason's figure vanished among the trees, Charlotte stood at the window, staring at a distant snowy peak glittering in the light. Fear and curiosity warred within her. She knew she'd left her comfort zone and embarked on a new challenge. Her first afternoon in Edelberg closed with her hands caked in dirt from pulling radishes in the garden. Here, power was not a fur shawl but the ability to work with one's own hands. And a man named Mason Blackwood, with eyes both stern and gentle, had planted a seed of curiosity about this fresh, surprising life. The second dawn sunlight slipped through the wooden window of House 17, painting warm golden rays on the opposite wall. The village bell tolled 6 times, a cool breeze carried the scent of dew-damp grass through the cracks. Charlotte Whitmore opened her eyes, trying to shake off the soreness from her first day's toil. Dirt still stained her shirt sleeves, and clumps of dried mud clung to her cuffs. Outside, footsteps clacked on the stone courtyard. Mason Blackwood stood there, a thick sweater draped over his shoulders, his face still drowsy but composed. He inclined his head in greeting before speaking. "Today at 7 a.m., we begin in the stables. Remember your rubber boots and gloves." Charlotte was about to ask for a handkerchief when Mason turned and left her amid the courtyard's patchwork of villagers gathering in small groups. "Look how hard the city heiress worked yesterday," someone whispered. "Wonder if she'll dare to wash clothes by hand," another teased. "She looks half asleep, must be sore." Women in aprons leaned over the fence, holding fresh-picked baskets, worried yet curious. The young herders eyed Charlotte with mischievous delight. No more lavish life for her, she looks pathetic. Charlotte bit her lip, forcing her hands to steady as she slipped her gloves back on, dragging her sleeve over a bruise. At that moment, Mason reappeared, carrying a plate of warm toasted bread. "Eat quickly before it cools," he urged, placing it before her. The simple fare, dark rye slices and soft cheese, smelled heavenly. Charlotte nodded her thanks and took a bite. Crumbs dusted her lips as she sipped the floral tea. When a villager's knock announced readiness, Mason led Charlotte to the stable beside the kitchen. Slants of morning light cut through the thatched roof, illuminating Alba, the village's newest horse. Tall and broad, her mane shining white, she stood patiently, her gentle eyes seeming to understand everything. "This is Alba," Mason introduced. "This week you will learn to care for her and ride her." Charlotte nodded, watching him bend to feed the horse grass. He turned, expression serious. "First, you must clean the stall. Remove all the old bedding and manure, then lay fresh straw. I'll observe." His tone brooked no argument. Charlotte felt the gulf between this and Geneva. There, a hand wave summoned a servant. Here, even the dirtiest tasks fell to her own shoulders. She stooped, shoveling straw and waste through the stall door. The pungent odor nearly overwhelmed her, but pride kept tears at bay. Outside, the villagers watched in silence, sometimes with pitying sighs. Less than an hour later, as Charlotte wiped sweat from her brow, Mason approached. "All right. Now feed her and then groom her coat." She mixed oats, dried grass, and mashed hard-boiled egg in the feed trough. Alba sniffed and munched obediently. Charlotte exhaled in relief. Next, she took a wooden brush and began stroking the horse's mane. Each bristle sent Alba's silken hair swirling in the sun. The steady scratch of wood on hide soothed Charlotte, and she found herself smiling as the horse closed her eyes in contentment. Mason watched from behind, his gaze softer than the day before. He spoke, "Be meticulous. Even a moment's haste can spook a horse and endanger you both." Charlotte recalled her neglected leather gloves back home with a wry smile. "If I must learn, I'll do it right." After grooming, Mason led her to the clearing by the village shrine to learn riding. At first, Charlotte's legs trembled as Alba trotted, her heart pounding. Mason held the reins low, guiding her step by step. When the horse picked up speed, he placed a firm hand on her waist. "Relax. If you tense up, Alba will feel it and bolt." Charlotte gritted her teeth and loosened her grip. After several circuits, excitement replaced fear. For the first time, she believed physical labor could bring joy. That evening, Charlotte returned with blistered hands. Mason guided her to a rocking chair on the porch. "Let me apply this," he said, pulling a small jar of green herbal salve from his canvas bag and gently rubbing it over her sores. She winced but met his tender gaze and could not remain aloof. Villagers drifted by, offering wildflowers and fruit, and an old woman pressed a pouch of forest tobacco into Charlotte's hand. "Smoke for relief, child," she said with a warm smile that touched Charlotte's heart. As dusk fell, Charlotte sat on the porch railing, drawing a deep breath. "Mason. Thank you," she whispered. He simply nodded and walked away, leaving her looking after his figure receding into the twilight. Inside her chest, a small spark of curiosity and respect for this rugged life took root. Dew still clung to every blade of grass when the morning sun crested the mountain peaks, painting the yard before the stable in a rosy glow. Charlotte stepped outside, her white blouse now dingy with dust, cheeks flushing under the village's watchful gaze. Mason waited for her, holding a small notebook and pen. "Today you have 3 main tasks," he said in a steady, teacher-like tone. "First, give the horse fresh water. Then clear away the leftover feed. Finally, harvest the herbs on the hill, those will be used for tea and soup. Learn to distinguish each type carefully." Charlotte nodded, more determined than yesterday. "I can't afford to fail on day 1, she told herself. At the corner of the stable, Mason had placed a bucket of cool water. He pointed to Lisa, the small brown mare, and instructed, "Set the bucket in the center, pour the water in, then sweep the floor dry before Lisa drinks. Wet sand can make her hooves slip." Charlotte lifted the bucket, it was heavier than she'd imagined, and tipped the water in. A spray splashed the sand, and Lisa hesitated, her hoof sliding once. Charlotte's heart leapt, she hurried to sweep up the puddle and pat the sand dry. Sweat beaded on her brow, her pulse pounding. Mason stepped forward, gently taking the bucket from her grip. "Take your time. Here, a careful action is far more important than speed, for both you and the horse." Once Lisa drank, Mason handed Charlotte a small hoe and a wooden tub. "Separate the leftover feed, old grass, and manure. Scoop them into this tub, close it tight, and we'll use it for compost." Charlotte bent over, gripping the worn fabric of her gloves as she heaved the hoe. She had never used one before, and dirt spilled everywhere. A scurry of field mice dashed toward the scraps, startling her into a squeal. "Mason. Mice." He smiled, stepping in to shoo them away with his bare hands. "Don't worry. They're used to people. Just stand still, and they'll run off." Charlotte watched them disappear, her chest tightening with emotion. This was the first time she truly felt part of nature, instead of living behind glass walls. Next, they climbed to the hilltop garden. Mason pointed out the cilantro and basil rows. To preserve the plant, only take the top 4 or 5 young leaves. Cutting too close to the stem will kill it. Charlotte knelt and raised her small knife. In her eagerness, she sliced the entire plant at its base. Mason stooped and gathered the broken leaves, laying them gently on a leaf liner. See? By doing a little at a time, the plant keeps growing. Charlotte's cheeks burned. I'm sorry. I'll try again. He merely nodded. That's fine. Just slow down next time and observe before you cut. In the cool morning air, Charlotte learned a priceless lesson: patience. She placed each small bundle of herbs into the hand-woven basket, her back aching as she filled it. When the basket brimmed, her first harvest was almost complete. Mason handed her a clean cloth. Wipe your hands, then let's prepare the tea. The soft fabric absorbed her sweat and dirt. She smiled for the first time. I feel remarkably peaceful. He looked up, surprised. Peace must be created, not given. By midday, they sat around a stone table on the porch, sipping steaming herbal tea. The faint aroma of cilantro and basil softened the warm sunlight. Villagers peered through the window bars, smiling at the sight of the city heiress harvesting herbs with her own hands. Charlotte lifted her cup. How long have you done this? Mason smiled wistfully. Since my father died and I came home to run the place, over 10 years now. She listened as he shared how he'd left the city behind to embrace the land. His distant, sad eyes spoke of sacrifices she could only begin to understand. And in that moment, Charlotte felt a kinship. Both of them had left familiar worlds to seek something deeper, belonging. Her first real lesson ended under the blazing noon sun. Charlotte rose to brush away fallen leaves, pride mingling with exhaustion. She had made many mistakes, but each one was a stepping stone. And Mason, her patient teacher, had seen the spark of determination in the city heiress, a small light that could grow into true friendship. At dawn on the day of the spring festival, the entire village of Edelberg seemed to don a vibrant new coat of color. Along the cobblestone road, pink ribbons fluttered in the breeze, cherry blossom branches filled wooden barrels on either side of the entrance, and atop each vendor's stall streamed alternating green and red flags, creating an atmosphere of celebration. The rich aroma of freshly baked bread and melted cheese mingled with the faint scent of basil wafting from the fresh produce market, stirring everyone's excitement. Charlotte Whitmore awoke in the wooden cottage, her heart fluttering with anticipation. Today she would don Edelberg's traditional dress for the first time, a pastel linen gown hand-embroidered with cherry blossoms, a thin woolen shawl tied in a bow at the back, and carved wooden clogs in a swallow motif. In the mirror, her golden hair swept up neatly, her face looked softer and more graceful than her usual sharp elegance. For the first time, Charlotte felt she truly belonged to these mountains. In the village square, the villagers gathered to await the opening ceremony. Mason Blackwood appeared in formal attire, a tailored black wool coat, a loosely draped gray scarf, and the Edelberg eagle emblem embroidered on his chest. He stood beside a lofty wooden podium, his gaze steady as the villagers looked on with trust and respect. Charlotte gripped Mason's hand, her heart pounding with pride. Jacob, the village elder, greeted each guest in turn, then smiled and stepped up to the podium. Today we welcome a new spring and the promise of budding life. I present to you Mason Blackwood, son of these mountains, who will lead our ceremony. A thunderous round of applause rose up. Charlotte pressed close behind Mason, feeling her heart swell. With every warm gaze from the villagers, she realized she was no longer merely the pampered city heiress on a country internship, but a true member of their community. Mason inclined his head in thanks, then spoke in his rich baritone. Thank you, Elder Jacob. Today we begin the spring festival with the awakening cherry blossom ritual, symbolic of vitality and unity. I invite Charlotte Whitmore to perform this rite with me. The villagers murmured in surprise and excitement as Charlotte stepped onto the platform, cheeks tinged pink but posture proud. Before them stood a frame holding a fresh cherry branch, its scent delicate in the morning air. Mason handed her a small bronze pair of scissors. Please cut the central branch and place it in the ancestral offering vase. Then we will sprinkle it with pure spring water to bring good fortune. Charlotte drew a steady breath, hand trembling as she took the scissors. She met Mason's encouraging smile, then delicately sliced through the stem. The branch swayed, releasing, and she placed it gently into the white glazed vase. She then tilted a nearby pitcher of spring water so that clear droplets glistened on each petal like blessings. Another roar of applause greeted their bow, Mason first, then Charlotte. The village bells pealed in unison, marking the ritual's success. Charlotte heard the proud whispers of middle-aged women behind her. She did so gracefully. After the ceremony, the villagers moved as one toward the food stalls and game booths. Mason led Charlotte by the hand, pointing out each attraction: wild mushroom bao, smoked cheese, hand-embroidered souvenirs. At the handicraft stall, Charlotte paused before a length of hand-woven cloth patterned with mountain motifs in warm russet tones. Moments before, it had been raw wool, now she marveled at the finished fabric. "It's beautiful," she breathed. The elderly weaver nodded knowingly. "You should try weaving yourself, then you'll appreciate it even more." Charlotte glanced at Mason. He merely nodded. She picked up a needle and length of wool and began stitching tiny, careful stitches under the weaver's patient guidance. Though her hand shook at first, she realized that labor did more than produce goods. It taught patience, precision, and humility. Midway through the afternoon, Mason led her to a small stage where folk instruments played, the Alpine horn's clear call, the drum's steady beat. A troupe of dancers performed the cherry blossom dance, swirling embroidered fans and lanterns in graceful arcs. Charlotte watched at the rail, tears glistening in her eyes at the traditional art's beauty. Mason leaned in. "Soon you will dance with them." I don't know how," Charlotte blurted, cheeks flaming. "You'll learn," he said with a smile. "I'll teach you every basic step." Surrounded by encouraging faces, Charlotte no longer recoiled from the challenge. Mason took her hand, guiding her wrist in fan-twirling motions and teaching her the gentle footwork. Though awkward at first, she soon felt herself merge with the music's rhythm. When the troupe invited her onto the stage, she smiled brightly and waved her fan in time. A cheer erupted when she finished with a perfect twirl, the fan drifting in her hand. From below, Mason's eyes shone with pride. Charlotte bowed, brimming with triumph, not for the praise itself, but for having surpassed her own limits. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the spring festival closed with a glittering fireworks display over the mountains. Charlotte and Mason stood atop the observation deck, wind teasing her hair, her face aglow with joy. Mason reached into his pocket and drew out a dried cherry blossom branch, handing it to her. "To remember today." Charlotte clasped it to her heart, eyes shining. "Thank you, Mason, for helping me find new joy." He smiled and laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Every time you conquer your fears, I am proudest of all." As the fireworks faded and only starlight and mountain air remained, Charlotte understood that the spring festival was not just a celebration of nature's blossoms, but a festival in her own heart, where friendship, love, and personal transformation mingled to sow the seeds of new dreams. A chilly breeze swept over the wildflower-covered hill, carrying the sweet scent of honey from the scattered beehives nestled in the rock crevices. Mason Blackwood had invited Charlotte to join him in harvesting wild honey, an important task to supply the village bakery and tea house. The excitement and trepidation on the city heiress's face were plain as she prepared to handle the beehives nestled in the stone walls. Mason smiled reassuringly. "Have you ever watched me gather honey?" Charlotte shook her head, voice a mix of eagerness and nerves. "No, but I've heard Edelberg honey is the best in the region." He nodded and handed her a protective outfit, a mesh veil and thick gloves, then pointed to a wooden crate beneath a large boulder. Stand back from the rock at a safe distance and hold the crate. I'll use the smoker to calm the bees, then gently remove the comb. Charlotte donned the veil and gloves, fumbling but determined. Mason lit a small tinder bundle and guided the smoke pipe toward the hive. The buzzing hush fell, and with deft fingers, he coaxed a slab of honeycomb free, letting golden honey stream into the crate. Wide-eyed, Charlotte watched every skillful movement. "You make it look so easy," she murmured. "I didn't expect it to flow so fast." Mason's gaze softened. "I've done this for over a decade, but don't worry. Your turn is next." He placed the comb on a wooden board and, with a small knife, began slicing through the wax. Streams of amber honey glistened in the late afternoon sunlight like liquid gold. Charlotte stepped forward, laughter in her eyes. Until her foot slipped on the slick rock. Oof! She tumbled down the slick slope, flailing. Instinctively, Mason dropped the comb and lunged to catch her. But the uneven terrain sent them both careening toward a steep embankment. Charlotte clung to him as they tumbled, her heart pounding, her arms wrapped tight around his neck. Mason held her close, voice low with concern. "Hold on to me. Are you all right?" Charlotte lifted her head, pale and shaken, hair damp with sweat and honey. "I'm fine, just..." A sharp pain shot through her wrist as she instinctively tried to break the fall. Mason gently cradled her injured arm, his brow dark with worry. "I see a nasty scrape on your wrist. Let me..." He helped her up, guiding her carefully down the slope. The sky overhead had turned violet, the air cooling. Charlotte bit back a moan, pressing herself against his strong frame for support. Mason led her along the forest path until they reached the safety of House 17's porch, his steps sure and steady. Inside, a lamp flickered warmly, chasing away the chill. Mason settled Charlotte in a rocking chair and fetched bandages and herbal salve from his medical kit. Villagers peered in through the window, shaking their heads in admiration. "The heiress is no longer so fragile," one elder whispered. Mason gently cleaned the wound with cool herbal water. Charlotte winced but did not pull away. "Does it hurt?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, managing a small smile despite her pallor. "With you by my side, I'm not afraid." His expression softened as he wrapped her wrist in white gauze. Then he guided her closer to the hearth. He boiled water, brewed fruit tea, and offered her a steaming cup. "Drink this. It will help ease the pain." Charlotte cradled the cup, grateful. The warm sweetness and lingering honey aroma soothed her. The firelight danced across her features, and Mason's eyes softened as he watched her. "You did well today," he said. "Though it was dangerous, you dared greatly." Charlotte looked up, feeling her heart flutter. In that moment, she realized their bond ran deeper than respect or gratitude. It sprang from his steady protection, his gentle care, and the kindness in his gaze. "Thank you, Mason, for staying by my side," she whispered. He bent close, voice tender. "I will always be here for you." Their hands met, a spark passing between them. The evening hush embraced them as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Charlotte leaned into his warmth, softly asking, "What was the greatest lesson you learned today?" Mason brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead and pressed a gentle kiss there. "Courage and trust, courage to face danger and trust in the one who stands beside you." In the cozy glow of the cottage, two hearts bridged the gap between city and mountain life, their feelings unfolding like the honeyed sweetness lingering on Charlotte's lips. And so the first true chapter of their shared journey closed, one of compassion discovered in the aftermath of peril, and love quietly taking root. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the bedroom window, illuminating the gauze still wrapped around Charlotte's wrist. She awoke groggily, a dull ache reminding her of last night's injury. On the bedside table stood a cup of warm water and Mason's herbal salve, the only care he had left before slipping quietly away. He sat at the foot of her bed, his hands folded, gaze drifting between her wound and her face. "Did you sleep well?" he asked gently. Charlotte touched the bandage. "A little tender, but I'm okay. Thank you for watching over me all night." Mason set down the cup. "I only did what anyone would do. Today we're not pushing ourselves, just a stroll through the woods." She smiled, comforted. "As long as I'm with you, I'm not afraid." He returned her smile and helped her down to the porch. The forest path wound through damp ferns and mossy roots, bird calls echoed in the crisp air. They walked in companionable silence, letting the gentle rustle of needles overhead lull them. After a time, Mason broke the quiet. "Yesterday. You were very brave. You shouldn't have risked yourself like that." Charlotte shook her head. "I understand the danger, but I wanted to learn and to prove I belong here. Even if I fall, I want to stand on my own." Mason stopped and looked into her eyes. "Are you always this determined?" She held up her bandaged hand. "What do you think?" He smiled softly. "You are nothing like the pampered heiress I imagined. You admit mistakes, you fix them, and you never back down. I respect you more than anyone I know." Charlotte's cheeks flushed with happiness. "Thank you, your praise means more than you know." Mason grew serious. "But I also owe you an apology. Yesterday I left you alone with the chores outside the stable and garden. I should have considered your still healing wrist." Charlotte reached for his hand. "I understand. I know you want me to grow strong. But sometimes I need you beside me, not just watching from afar." He drew her close, breath warm against her hair. "I will always be here when you need me." In that quiet forest glade, Charlotte leaned into Mason's shoulder as he wrapped an arm around her. The wind whispered through the pines, and simply being together felt like home. Later, they came upon a flat stone beside a clear stream. Mason produced a loaf of dark rye bread and a block of cheese from his pack, slicing both in half. He handed her a piece, her eyes sparkled. "You always know how to surprise me," she said, biting into the hearty bread. "Because you deserve the best," he replied, grinning. They ate in companionable silence, the only soundtrack the babble of water over pebbles. Charlotte realized she'd left behind the gilded halls of Geneva for this, simple, honest moments that felt profoundly fulfilling. Before they left, Mason took a length of braided leather from his pocket. "I made this for you. Wear it whenever you feel uncertain, let it remind you I'm always here." Charlotte fastened the bracelet around her wrist, warmth flooding through her. She handed him a small silver cherry blossom hairpin, her father's parting gift. "A memento of us," she whispered. Mason's eyes glowed with gratitude as he tucked the pin into his coat. Then, side by side, they retraced their steps back through the woods, hearts intertwined and ready for whatever lay ahead. Morning mist still clung to the pine needles when Mason assigned Charlotte a special task: help him and the local carpenters repair the old granary at the forest's edge. Once used by his late father to store seed and tools, the weathered wood had rotted and leaked, endangering the village's winter provisions. Restoring it would benefit the community and draw Charlotte closer to this rugged way of life. Charlotte greeted each member of the crew: Hans the master carpenter, Marta the leatherworker and saddle mender, and several skilled young villagers. At first she hesitated as Mason handed her a small hammer and measuring stick, but Hans encouraged her with a nod. "You're learning fast, Charlotte." His simple praise warmed her more than any city accolade. They began by prying out old, splintered boards. Charlotte positioned the hammer's claw carefully under each rusted nail head, levering it free with steady pressure. Her hands bruised when a nail slipped, but Mason quickly appeared with a damp cloth to soothe the reddened skin. "You are persistent," he admired. Next, they carried newly treated pine planks to the clearing. The crisp scent of fresh wood mixed with pine resin in her lungs. Over a break, Marta and Charlotte sat at a makeshift table sipping Mason's wildflower tea. Marta leaned close, whispering, "Out here you learn the power of the land and people working in harmony, something the city can't teach." Charlotte nodded, absorbing each word. In the afternoon, they fitted the new boards to the granary frame. Mason showed Charlotte how to hold the measuring stick flush against the beam and mark the exact cut with pencil, a variance of less than a millimeter guaranteed a weather-tight fit. She marked each line carefully, then guided the saw along the grain, hands steady as the blade whispered through the wood. Though imperfect, each cut brought her pride. Throughout the work, Charlotte and Mason exchanged smiles and quick glances of encouragement. He lifted heavy timbers, she passed hammer and nails. When dusk approached, the granary stood renewed, sturdy boards, a patched roof, and sealed seams. The villagers cheered, and Hans clapped Charlotte on the back. "You've done well, city miss." As twilight fell, Mason presented her with a small carved block of leftover wood, etched with Edelberg 2025 and the village eagle. "Keep this to remember today," he said. Charlotte pressed it to her heart, grateful. On the walk home, she cradled the memento. "Thank you for letting me help," she said softly. Mason slipped his arm through hers. "You're not just a guest here, you're part of this community now." Under the rising moon, Charlotte realized this training was more than labor lessons, it was the restoration of her own sense of worth through honest work and shared purpose. That evening, a crimson fire danced in the hearth of House 17's main room, filling the wooden walls with warmth. Outside, wind rustled the pines in a mournful melody. Charlotte sat curled in an armchair, steaming mug in hand, while Mason perched across from her, staring into the flames as if lost in distant memories. "This place feels so safe," she began. "Thank you for sharing your world with me. But I want to know more about your parents." Mason was silent for a long moment, then sighed, eyes misting. "My parents, Anna and Robert Blackwood, built a renowned law firm in Geneva. I was their only son, expected to carry on the legacy. They loved me, but with iron discipline. Excellence was the only option." The firelight etched lines of weariness on his face. "I pushed myself through late nights, social galas, honors. But inside, I was hollow. I turned to bars and wine to numb the emptiness, but it only deepened." Charlotte reached out, her empathy genuine. "I can't imagine that pressure. You must have felt very alone." He nodded. "One day I got word father collapsed of a sudden stroke. I rushed back to Geneva. I held his portrait, watched my mother crumble, and realized I had nothing left there. Every street corner held a memory of impossible expectations." Her voice soft. "What about your mother?" Mason's gaze grew distant. "She expected me to take over the firm. When I said I was leaving for Edelberg, she wept and pleaded. For months we argued, then, she quietly sent me a letter: 'Live the life that brings you happiness, I trust you to find your peace.' She had never spoken to me that way." His eyes warmed with gratitude. "Her words gave me the courage to come home." Charlotte's heart tightened. "I have a similar story. In Geneva, I was Miss Whitmore, the pampered daughter of a billionaire. My mother died when I was young, there was only my father. He showered me with wealth and parties but never taught me to stand on my own. I learned from servants, tutors, event planners, but never real independence." Mason leaned forward. Charlotte continued, voice trembling, "When he told me I'd train in Edelberg, I felt angry, exiled. But I see now it was the hardest and most important lesson I needed. Here, I learned humility, the value of honest labor. and that life can be simple yet rich. Mason reached across to hold her hand. Do you know why I respect you so much? Not just because you're brave, but because you face your past and admit your shortcomings. That's true maturity. Charlotte's eyes glistened as she looked at him. Being here, I feel free to be myself, learning, growing, and I love you, Mason. Silence wrapped around them as the fire crackled. Then Mason took her other hand and drew her close. I love you, too, Charlotte. From the moment you first tasted that honey, from every time you rose after a fall, I've loved your spirit. In the flickering glow, two hearts, each scarred by past expectations, found solace and hope together. Between the crackling logs and the whispering pines, they uncovered their histories and laid the groundwork for a shared future built on understanding, compassion, and love. Late afternoon bathed Edelberg in a gentle sunset glow. Pink clouds drifted above the mountain cliffs, tinting every pine needle in rosy light. Mason Blackwood led Charlotte to a high outcrop with an unobstructed view of the valley and distant peaks. The rocky trail up was flanked by green cornfields and wildflower meadows just beginning to bloom. Hand in hand, Charlotte said softly, I wanted to see the sunset here because you told me. This was the most beautiful spot in the village. Mason smiled and brushed her hair back. After all your hard work, you deserve a peaceful evening. They settled on the flat rock side by side, not too close, yet intimately connected. Mason set down his canvas satchel and retrieved 2 cups of now lukewarm herbal tea. The scent of pine and wild blossoms drifted around them. Charlotte took a sip, eyes lifting to the sweeping panorama. The sky here. It's not like in the city. In Geneva, the blue is flat and painted. Here, it shifts every moment, each view a new painting. Mason turned to her, eyes gentle. Just like us. You've changed so much since arriving in Edelberg. Charlotte hesitated, then her eyes gleamed. I never imagined I'd love this life so much. I remember the thrill of wielding a hammer, the rush of my first ride, the warmth of the villagers' trust. But most of all, the peace I feel in my heart. Mason was silent a moment, then asked quietly, Are you speaking of your feelings? For me? Charlotte's cheeks went pink. I don't know what to call it. I respect you, for teaching me humility, for showing me the value of honest work. But my heart grows warmer when I'm with you. I think I'm in love with you, Mason. His heart stirred like waves. He took her hand, gazing deeply. Charlotte, I've wondered if my feelings were just gratitude. But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize I cannot live without you. From your first genuine smile to every time you faced a challenge, I fell in love, not with the city heiress, but with the honest, courageous, gentle person you are. Charlotte beamed, tears of joy glistening. I want to walk this path with you. Even if it's full of obstacles. Mason drew her to his shoulder and inhaled the scent of her golden hair. I promise I will always be by your side, guiding you through every hardship. As the sunset painted the valley red, they sat in silence, sharing warmth and the beauty of nature. A flock of wild geese winged homeward, and the wind whispered through Charlotte's hair, composing a hauntingly sweet melody. After a while, Mason gently turned Charlotte to face him and asked, Do you believe we were meant to find each other? I once thought I was lost, but in you, I found my way home. Charlotte gripped his hand firmly, affirming, I do. Coming to Edelberg was fate for both of us. From his pocket, Mason withdrew a small wooden box engraved with E and C and inlaid with a cherry blossom motif. Inside lay a simple, elegant silver ring. The wind fluttered through the pines as he knelt on the rock and spoke in a warm, resonant voice. Charlotte Whitmore, will you marry me, build our lives together here in Edelberg, where we found each other and real happiness? Charlotte's breath caught, her heart racing. Yes. Yes, of course I will. He slid the ring onto her finger, pressing her hand to his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. I love you, Charlotte. Now and forever. Tears of bliss filled her eyes as she embraced him. I love you too, Mason. Thank you for showing me what true happiness is. On that high cliff, as the sun set for the last time that day, their love had only just begun, binding two hearts with a promise of warmth, sweetness, and an enduring journey together. The next morning, mist still hovered on the orchard leaves as Mason led Charlotte to the ancient apple grove east of the village. The first fruit of the season, round and heavy on the branches, promised abundance and luck. Charlotte ran her fingers over a ripe apple, savoring a simple joy. Suddenly, the distant roar of a black limousine's engine made them both start. Mason stopped, concern in his eyes as he scanned the winding path. At that moment, Edward Whitmore, Charlotte's father, stepped from the car in a charcoal gray suit, his calm, stern face taking in the tranquil orchard. He paused, then allowed himself a small smile. Edelberg is so peaceful. Quite unlike noisy Geneva. Charlotte hurried forward, excitement and nerves mingling in her voice. Father. Why did you come early? Edward raised an eyebrow, looking from Charlotte to Mason. I wanted to see what my daughter has truly learned in these 2 weeks of training. And is this the man you've been speaking of? Mason advanced respectfully, hands clasped. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. I'm Mason Blackwood, Charlotte's guide and daily instructor here in Edelberg. Edward scrutinized him. You taught my daughter to ride, to tend vegetables, even to rebuild the old granary. I know she's industrious, but let's see how well it holds up. Charlotte felt her heart pound. Father, I've learned so much. How to be self-reliant and responsible for every task. Edward turned back to the orchard, voice serious. Independence is good, but family values must endure. I don't want you to lose your roots or forget our heritage. Mason sensed the tension and stepped forward gently. Mr. Whitmore, Edelberg has not only taught Charlotte life skills, but also patience, compassion, and community spirit. Those are the foundations that will make her a well-rounded woman. Edward studied Charlotte. And what are your plans once this training ends? Will you return to Geneva to run the family firm, or remain here? Mason answered confidently, I asked Charlotte. She wishes to combine both, use her experience here to establish a rural labor empowerment fund, and also help the Whitmore family expand youth life skill training in the city. Edward was taken aback. A charitable fund, and a training program. Charlotte grasped Mason's hand, eyes shining. I want to use what I've learned here to help those like me, rich in theory but poor in real-world experience and humility. Silence fell, the villagers watching respectfully from behind them. Finally, Edward exhaled and nodded. I'm proud of you. You've shown me that independence need not mean isolation, and that honest work is indeed precious. I approve your project. Tears of joy sprang to Charlotte's eyes. She ran into her father's arms, and Mason stood beside them, smiling with relief. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Whitmore, Mason said softly. Edward handed him a fountain pen engraved E. Whitmore. You deserve this. Continue to support my daughter, and perhaps find a piece of Edelberg in your own heart. Mason bowed deeply. Thank you, sir. I promise to care for and stand by Charlotte. Before departing, Edward shook hands with the gathered villagers, acknowledging that Mason and Charlotte were indeed a fitting match. Applause echoed through the valley like a new beginning. As the limousine rolled away, Charlotte and Mason stood in the orchard, watching the taillights fade. Mason drew her close and pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. Your father has witnessed your growth, and mine, he said softly. Charlotte slipped into his arms, smiling. Thank you for believing in me. Now, let's build our future together. A gentle spring breeze stirred the apple blossoms, scattering petals like blessings. In that clear afternoon light, hand in hand, they walked back toward the wooden cottage, ready to embark on a new chapter, not just for themselves but for an entire community united by warmth and shared dreams. Night had fallen over Edelberg, leaving only the rustle of pine needles and the distant murmur of the stream. In the warm glow of House 17's main room, candles fluttered on a low table, casting dancing shadows on the wood walls. Mason Blackwood stepped onto the porch, where a dry cherry branch still gave off a faint floral scent, when a soft knock came at the door. "Mason, my mother's apple wine is wonderful tonight. Care for a glass?" It was Lionel, Mason's childhood friend. Mason smiled, passing Lionel a porcelain cup inlaid with pine motifs, then called inside, "Charlotte, come share some wine." Charlotte appeared at the door, her eyes still red from pillow tears. Wrapped in a thick sweater and scarf, she offered a tired smile. "I heard Edelberg's apple wine is special. You saved some for this evening?" Mason nodded, holding up a round clay flask. "Only for important occasions. And tonight marks 2 weeks since you arrived." Charlotte joined him on the rocking chair. Lionel slipped away into the shadows, leaving them alone. Mason poured the wine, its gentle hiss warmed the silence. He handed Charlotte her cup, gaze intent. "Why haven't you drunk?" Charlotte inhaled the tart sweet aroma and took a cautious sip. The mild warmth spread through her. "It's wonderful. Smoother than the city's wine." Mason smiled. "Here, everything comes from nature and people's hearts. Even our wine." Charlotte placed her cup on the railing, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Mason, sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I'd never come to Edelberg." He paused, gazing at the moon. "Do you ever regret leaving Geneva?" Charlotte turned to him, eyes misting. "I was angry with my father. Angry at the world for exiling me here. But more than anyone, I now see how lucky I am to have met you and these villagers. I've learned so much, about work, compassion, and the grace of nature. I fear the old me might resurface someday and make me forget what I've found here." Mason gently clasped her hand against his chest. "I understand. You laid down your past to embrace this challenge. You deserve every good thing Edelberg offers." Charlotte drew a deep breath, voice trembling. "Mason, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I was afraid I lacked the courage." Mason tilted her chin up, eyes encouraging. "Just speak, it doesn't matter what it is, I'll always listen." She looked down, then slowly up again. "Mason Blackwood, it's not just your lessons I treasure. It's not just gratitude for your protection and guidance. I love you." Silence fell, broken only by the creak of the porch swing and the stream's murmur. Mason rose and cupped her face, meeting her gaze. "You're saying what I've held in my heart for so long." Charlotte's heart thundered. "You feel the same?" He nodded, voice low and sure. "I love you, Charlotte. From your first taste of honey, that fall in the orchard, every moment you chose courage over fear. I love your strength, your humility, and your genuine smile." Charlotte pressed herself into his arms. The 2 cups of wine were long forgotten as they shared their first kiss under the silver moonlight, an unspoken vow of devotion. "You are the greatest blessing of my life," Mason whispered against her hair. "I promise to cherish and protect you always." Charlotte's eyes glistened as she whispered back, "Then what shall we call each other, from now on?" Mason drew her closer and murmured, "From this moment, you are mine, and I am yours, forever." Beneath the night sky, on the porch of a humble cottage in Edelberg, 2 hearts found their forever, no longer heiress and mountain man, but lovers bound by trust, gratitude, and the promise of all tomorrows together. At first light, a thin veil of mist still clung to the roof of cottage number 17 when Charlotte Whitmore awoke. She bolted upright, only to find the bed beside her empty, the blanket neatly folded where Mason had lain. The warm room suddenly felt deserted. Glancing at the wall clock, she saw it was 5:30 a.m., hours earlier than usual. Her heart twisted with anxiety. Pulling on her wool sweater in a rush, she hurried onto the porch. Dewdrops glittered on each step under the dim lantern light. No footsteps approached, no familiar coat hung by the door. Her chest tightened at the thought, where has Mason gone? She recalled his promise, we'll only take a morning walk through the woods, then return. So why was he gone before dawn? Shadows rustled at the forest's edge. Charlotte drew a deep breath against the chill and hurried along a mud-slick trail, following faint footprints. Each step seemed to echo her pounding heartbeat. Will he come back? Does he remember me? The mere idea of being left alone in this vast wilderness was unbearable. Finally, she glimpsed Mason hunched beside a narrow mountain stream, tying a heavy log across it with thick rope. He looked up in alarm at her approaching footsteps, worry flashing in his eyes. "Charlotte, you're up early. I came to check the flood culvert. You should head back and rest." Charlotte brushed past him, voice trembling with hurt. "I'd planned to help you. Why did you go alone? I want to be by your side." Mason hesitated, sorrow softening his gaze. "I didn't want you struggling so early, and I worry about your healing wrist. I thought you needed rest." Though his concern was warm, Charlotte's tears sprang forth. "I know you care, but I need you beside me. I can't bear the thought of being apart. I love you, Mason." He laid down his tool and enveloped her in a gentle embrace. In the pale dawn light, her hair tumbled over his shoulder, her heart racing against his chest. "Please don't cry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. You are always my priority, but I wanted to protect you from hardship." Charlotte lifted her tear-streaked face, resolve returning to her eyes. "I accept the risk if it means being with you. Don't keep me in the dark or away from help. Let me stand with you, no matter what comes." Mason's pride and love shone in his smile. "You are truly courageous. All right, from now on, I will share everything. We face every challenge together." He wiped her tears and guided her hand to the rope-bound log. "Help me secure this," he invited. Charlotte nodded and fastened the rope as best she could. Below, the stream burbled, witness to their renewed unity. Her fear of separation melted away, replaced by the comforting knowledge that together, they could weather any storm. A sudden spring rain began to patter as Mason and Charlotte led a herd of goats along the narrow trail to the northern hills. Fine droplets soaked into Charlotte's wool cap and sleeves, making her shiver with cold and excitement. Mason leaned close, his voice a quiet encouragement. "Hold the reins firmly, keep the goats calm." Charlotte tightened her grip, watching beads of water sparkle on her fingers like crystal against the rugged mountain backdrop. Below them, the old stream roared louder, the rain drumming in steady rhythm. The path grew steeper and the ground more treacherous. Charlotte frowned in concern. "Mason, are you sure we can get the herd through here?" He offered a warm smile and drew her nearer. "Don't worry. You've learned so much already. I'm right here." Suddenly, a young goat slipped in the slick mud and tumbled. Mason sprang forward, scooping it up and guiding it to firm ground. Charlotte looked on in awe. "You saved the goat instead of me." He met her gaze with gentle gravity. "Caring for animals is as important as caring for people. Every life deserves protection." Charlotte admired his kindness to all living things. Thunder rumbled in the distance and the rain fell harder. She bit her lip. "If the stream floods, can we make it back in time?" Mason removed her cap and draped a protective shawl around her shoulders, hand firm on her arm. Let's find shelter first. There's an old wooden shed nearby. We can wait out the storm, then continue. They trudged through the downpour until they discovered a weathered shed in a grassy clearing. Though the thatch roof leaked, it provided enough cover. Mason urged Charlotte inside. Come in. She collapsed against the wall, hugging herself. It's so cold. He drew her against him, sharing his warmth. Let me hold you. You won't get wet. In the corner, the goats huddled for refuge, eyes wide and damp. Charlotte whispered to them, just like when you first taught me about horses. Mason chuckled softly. Yes, but today it's goat herding. The wind howled through broken slats, the shed creaking as though ready to collapse. Charlotte clung to Mason, raindrops tracing lines down her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, voice muffled by the storm. Mason. I'm sorry I dragged you into this weather. He cut her off abruptly, tone solemn. Charlotte. She looked up, stunned, as he pulled a silver cherry blossom bracelet from his coat pocket. In the ethereal rainlight, the bracelet shimmered. I have something important to tell you. Charlotte's voice trembled. You're apologizing again? Mason shook his head, eyes alight with determination. Not an apology. I'm here to make an announcement. He knelt in the muddy floor beside her and placed the bracelet in her palm. Charlotte Whitmore, from the day you set foot in Edelberg, you transformed my life. You taught me to love honest work, to be patient, and most of all, to love myself again. Charlotte's heart constricted. Rain mixed with silent tears on her cheeks. I thought we'd already declared our love. Mason offered a tender smile. That was just a corner of my heart. Now, I want to declare it to the entire world. Will you be my partner for life, through storms and sunshine, together building our family? The rain hushed as if in anticipation. Charlotte nodded, voice barely audible. Yes. I will. Mason swept her into his arms amid the downpour, the world around them soaked with their hearts glowing with warmth. He pressed her face to his shoulder and whispered, From now on, you are mine, and I am yours, no matter the tempest. Their first kiss under spring rain sealed a vow that no storm could wash away. In that lonely shed on the mountain, two hearts pledged forever against the roar of thunder and the song of the wild. Dawn's first rays filtered through the pines, sparkling on Charlotte's damp hair and the cherry blossom bracelet on her wrist, a reminder of last night's promise, you are mine, and I am yours. But today brought more than their shared resolve. A familiar black limousine waited quietly at the gate. Charlotte unfurled the letter Mason had slipped into her coat yesterday, her father's plea, think carefully about your future. Taking a steadying breath, she tucked her travel satchel over her shoulder and found Mason beneath the old pine on the lawn, his tender gaze shadowed with concern. Mason, she whispered, heart pounding, before we go on blissfully like last night, I think we must speak to my parents about our decision. He squeezed her hand. I'm ready, but I want to hear your final choice. Charlotte managed a small smile, tinged with apprehension, and together they walked toward the car. Each step felt laden with both weight and excitement. Facing the limousine window, Edward Whitmore emerged, wiping the morning frost from his hands. Charlotte, have you decided? He asked, eyes both stern and hopeful. She bowed her head. Father, I know you care about my future. Mason and I have decided, I will remain in Edelberg, but not abandon the Whitmore legacy. I plan to establish life skill training programs here alongside family projects in the city. Edward regarded her closely, his initial reserve melting into pride. He turned to Mason. And what do you think? Mason stepped forward. Sir, Charlotte and I have discussed this night after night. We will become engaged next month in Edelberg, then hold celebrations here and in Geneva. She will use her city experience and our village's spirit to found a community fund. Edward blinked in surprise. A philanthropic fund, and a training initiative. Charlotte clasped Mason's hand, eyes bright. I want to help those like me, bright in theory but lacking true world experience and humility. The assembled villagers held their breath as Edward mulled over her words. At last he exhaled and nodded. I'm proud of you. You've shown me that independence need not isolate, and that honest labor is priceless. I approve your plan. Charlotte's tears of joy spilled forth as she embraced her father. Mason stood by her side, quietly beaming. Thank you for trusting us, Father, Mason said softly. Edward drew a fountain pen engraved E. Whitmore from his pocket and handed it to Mason. You've earned this. Continue to support my daughter, and let Edelberg remain in your heart as well. Mason bowed deeply. Thank you, sir. I promise to care for Charlotte and this community. Edward then greeted each villager, acknowledging their union and the bright future ahead. Applause echoed through the orchard like bells of blessing. As the limousine pulled away, Charlotte and Mason stood among the apple trees, watching its taillights fade. Mason slipped an arm around her shoulders and kissed her forehead. You completed that challenge brilliantly, and so did I. Charlotte nestled against him. Thank you for believing in me. Now we build our future together. A breeze stirred the blossoms, scattering petals like confetti. Hand in hand, they turned toward cottage number 17, stepping into a new chapter, one that would blend family, community, and love into a shared dream. On a bright winter's morning, a dusting of snow capped the roof of cottage number 17 as pale sunlight slit through the pines, spotlighting the few remaining cherry blossoms. The village of Edelberg awoke in jubilant anticipation. Today was the wedding of Mason Blackwood and Charlotte Whitmore, a ceremony celebrating two hearts united amidst these mountains. In the village square, benches were arranged in a half-circle, adorned with white ribbons and cherry blossom boughs. Villagers donned their finest linen and wool, their embroidered garments reflecting pride and joy. Hearth fires sent the mingled scents of smoked cheese and fresh rye bread into the crisp air, signaling the feast to come. Charlotte emerged on the porch in a cream-colored linen gown hand-embroidered by Marta, the village weaver. A delicate lace shawl draped her shoulders, and a sprig of cherry blossom nestled in her hair, whispering, "Spring lives in your heart." She carried a bouquet of wildflowers in pink and white and paused to see Mason waiting in a charcoal vest and emerald tie, the colors of Edelberg's valley. When Mason caught sight of her, his face brightened with pure joy. He bowed deeply in reverence as they walked together over the thin blanket of snow to the altar. Edward Whitmore stood beside Elder Jacob, smiling proudly as he gave his daughter's hand into Mason's. The villagers cheered, and the local choir rose in song, Blossoms of Edelberg, their voices soaring across the frosty air. Elder Jacob opened the ceremonial book. Mason Blackwood and Charlotte Whitmore, today you become husband and wife. Edelberg sends you its blessings, build your happiness and sow love throughout our community. Mason clasped Charlotte's hands, eyes filled with emotion. Charlotte Whitmore, since you entered my life, I have known what peace and faith truly mean. I vow to love, protect, and work with you to grow our community's dream. Charlotte returned his gaze, voice gentle and strong. Mason Blackwood, you showed me the worth of honest labor, compassion, and love. I promise to be your partner, colleague, and friend, together nurturing Edelberg and sharing our joy far and wide. Edward placed the wedding ring on Mason's finger, then Mason slipped the silver blossom ring onto Charlotte's. A jubilant applause rang out, and the village bells chimed their blessing. The reception unfolded under the open sky. Long tables laden with dark rye, smoked cheeses, orchard fruits, and honey cakes stood between snow-tipped pines. Villagers, guests from Geneva, and Whitmore relatives raised cups of amber apple wine in heartfelt toasts. Charlotte and Mason circulated, offering thanks, their eyes shining with gratitude. Nearby, children danced with paper blossoms to the Alpine horn's lively call, while elders swayed gently to drumbeats under the towering pines. Charlotte leaned close to Mason and whispered, "I never imagined I'd be this happy." He drew her into a slow dance in the snow, replying softly, "And I look forward to seeing you smile each day." At the village bakehouse, Marta and Hans presented a honey lavender wedding cake crowned with cherry blossoms. Charlotte carefully cut the first slice and handed it to Mason. "Shall we share the first bite?" He accepted, leaning in to murmur, "For my dearest love." They tasted the sweet cake as villagers applauded, its honeyed flavor a promise of the sweetness to come. As the celebration waned, Mason escorted Charlotte back to cottage number 17, their new home. Inside, they sat by the hearth and sketched plans, a life skill academy, an orchard expansion, and the arrival of their first students. Charlotte closed her eyes, inhaling the warmth. "I'm ready for our next chapter." Mason brushed a lock of hair from her face, smiling brightly. "Together, we begin." Outside, fresh snowflakes drifted down, covering the world in a pristine white. But no winter chill could touch the fire in their hearts. Hand in hand, they gazed at the home that would blossom with their love, duty, and shared dreams. Edelberg stood witness to their perfect joy and the promise of countless tomorrows. A gentle spring morning dawned on the second year since Charlotte and Mason wed, and Edelberg was ablaze with cherry blossom hues. Petals carpeted the winding paths, and the air brimmed with love and hope. The once pampered city heiress had become a woman of these mountains. Charlotte Blackwood was now expecting her first child, a blend of Whitmore and Blackwood blood, destined to carry both legacies into the future. Charlotte woke before sunrise, soft light filtering through her linen curtains. She stroked the round swell of her belly beneath a hand-knit sweater and smiled. Mason had already prepared a steaming cup of corn milk porridge on the hearthside table. He bent to press a warm kiss to her brow. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Very well. Though I'm hungry," Charlotte murmured with a laugh, her eyes bright as she looked up at him. Mason settled beside her. "This morning, how about trying Marta's new honey cheese walnut bread?" She added crushed walnuts for extra nourishment. Charlotte's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. May I have a slice?" He brought it to her on a wooden plate. In the cozy wood-paneled kitchen, they shared a simple but meaningful breakfast. The sweet honey and nutty aroma were a reminder of their journey, from the first days of sore hands and biting cold to this moment, preparing to welcome new life. After breakfast, Mason guided Charlotte into the orchard they had planted together. Dozens of young apple and cherry trees now bowed under their blooms, symbols of a love come to fruition. Nearby, village children gathered for their first life skills lesson, picking fruit, learning to tend the trees, and greeting their city visitors with pride. Charlotte gently traced a cherry blossom branch. "A year has flown by. I still remember that one painful morning in the stable." Mason slipped his arm around her shoulders, his smile tender. "That moment showed me how steadfast you are. You became my greatest inspiration." Leaning into his warmth, Charlotte whispered, "Today, I have something to teach you. We're going to have a baby. I don't need to learn heavy labor anymore. I've already mastered the greatest task of all, becoming a mother." Mason's eyes softened as he clasped her hands. "I promise to teach our child humility, kindness, and the value of honest work. Our little one will grow up surrounded by family love and community spirit." Together they strolled beneath the blossoming trees, hand in hand, the pastel petals dancing in the breeze, a living celebration of their shared future. Laughter and cheers from the orchard school drifted to them, mingling with the soft chime of the wind chime at the cottage door. All around, Edelberg bore witness to their perfect joy and the promise of new beginnings. As the sun set behind the distant peaks, Mason and Charlotte made their way back to the cottage. The kettle was already on the stove, its gentle whistle welcoming them home. Wrapped in each other's arms by the fire's glow, they sipped jasmine tea and savored the sweetness of a honey-drop candy. That night, Charlotte dreamed of running through a field of cherry blossoms with their laughing child, small feet pattering beside hers, echoing the love they had sown together. Outside, the village lay quietly under the moon, proud to have nurtured a love story that would blossom for generations to come.